This is another anthology that sets up the main characters and plot lines that basically lay the foundations of The Witcher's main saga. The tropes in this collection continue, and it carries on this whole monster of the week motif that seems to be quite popular these days. But of course, that structure makes it a hard sell for me. Sapkowski does go a bit deeper in this particular collection with his existential takes and perspectives. So I will do a quick review for you to see if in some way this may be appealing or could be to your liking, and if it's worth going through it. So stay tuned. Welcome to Biblioccultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, follow me on my socials. I'll put my X below, and I'll put my Ko-Fi account if you want to do a recurrent or a single donation, and you can visit my merch store. All of that will be in that link, and I would really appreciate it. In this episode, I will go over The Witcher, Sounds of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And this edition is from Orbit Books 2022. Like I've mentioned before, this is actually a very cool edition because it was not very expensive. And it has great illustrations inside. And the quality of the book is pretty good. And even the dust cover is pretty nice. So, as a general rule, it's difficult to find books that are meant for mass consumption that are pretty nice and not too expensive. They usually will spread it out into like 3 or 4 different editions, and the more you pay, the nicer they are. But this is a great example of a low-cost but high-quality edition. I'll put my Amazon affiliate link on the pinned comment, and you can go and check out all the books that I reviewed, or the majority, the ones I can find on Amazon. Because some books I review are specialties, so they're not going to be found there, but most of them are there. And you can pick any edition that you like. Content is king here, so it doesn't really matter to me which one you pick. And the channel gets a small percentage of the sale, and it really helps out to finance the project, and I appreciate it. Like I mentioned in my previous reject review, and this one will also be a reject review, my issues with this series continues basically because the author's world building and character development are just not that great, in my opinion. The fairy tale tropes used in this are exaggerated and are so cynical that I think they remove any true value that a fairy tale can have. And it is very likely that fairy tales are disliked by the author, and I mean deeply disliked, in a philosophical, artistic sense. And I've read people that don't like fairy tales as a general principle. They may find them to be generic type of stories or folklore, and some people just don't like folklore, and I understand. But I think that dismissing fairy tales or considering them to be bad literature tells you more about the personality of the author and not necessarily that much about the quality of the fairy tale. I mean, at the end of the day, most of our literature is founded upon fairy tales, folkloric, word of mouth, collective consciousness type of storytelling. And in most ancient cultures, that's the way to communicate a story anyway. So the fairy tale is a remnant of this. And I know that because of the Grimm brothers and a lot of the work done by folklorists in many other cultures, because you see that in Latin America as well, where you have these stories that have become part of our consciousness and been injected into mainstream literature. The same thing goes with urban legends and these kinds of things, which are a modern form of the fairy tale. But because of their public nature, they tend to be not as interesting to some people. Nonetheless, I think the issue here would be primarily the inclination of the fairy tale, which tends to be towards the fantastical and the heroic and this kind of thing. Now, of course, the author here, he goes deep into this mode, right? Monsters and fairies and the Witcher himself, Geralt, who is a hunter of monsters and carries with him a fair amount of cliche. But for some reason, the cliches in this work just bother me more than they entertain me. Like I mentioned before in the previous Reject review, I can't tell whether this is a comedy, a satire, basically, or a serious rendering. And I don't know if that's a good thing when you're reading a novel, that you can't even figure out what they're trying to do. Now, in this collection, we encounter the main characters that will follow the entire saga, right? So you have Ciri, again, you have Yennefer, and obviously the Witcher himself. But because these stories are so short and kind of put together haphazardly, or at least they appear to be, it is difficult to enter into the mood of that world without feeling that the author is creating his own Frankenstein of stories and trying to sell them as something more. And I've seen that people consider a lot of these works to have a lot of good philosophy. But I think it's because modern people confuse reflections with philosophical insights. And they're not really the same. All human beings have reflections. We consider life and think about life and come up with clever aphorisms and interesting perspectives. But that is not the same as having true philosophical insight. And I think this is why people find philosophy in everything. And I would argue that although this is true, yes, you can watch Star Trek and see some philosophy in there, it could also be said that a lot of it is superficial in a lot of the art that we would call popular. Here, the characters are constantly complaining and complicating ideas actually about life and philosophy, but they never dig in. It's never profound. And continuing the entire motif, they are also cliche. So the issue, I don't think it's ideological, is the complete absence of an apparent real conviction in anything. And I speculate it has to do with modernism, with postmodernism, with a hardcore sense of relativism as the undercurrent of the novel, and despair, which doesn't really allow the author to posit any concrete ethics or conceptions in the work. So if you see life as a miserable chaos that contains some kind of existential dread, maybe, but that it kind of stumbles through existence and that's the way it is, then obviously it's very difficult to develop true philosophy out of it. And I know there is such a thing as a philosophy of despair, a form of existential dread that is quite popular. And you could, in theory, present it as a philosophical system. But in this work, you don't even see that. You actually just see some kind of incoherent cynicism about existence. And I think this is why the characters are not very appealing. Now, they could be appealing for people who feel depressed and worthless because, like everything in life, it's a reflection. But I don't think it even communicates that very well, so that what seems to be a purposefully fragmented character is in fact just a badly written character. So it seems to be a world of might is right, for example, but begrudgingly so. Almost like the author resents the fact that the universe is about might is right. So the justifications for that philosophy are there, social Darwinism, but because it seems to be disliked, then the presentation of that philosophical point of view is incoherent. So even the monsters seem to be confused and bitter, and they also seem to think that everything is absurd. And that is interesting if the entire work would sustain this viewpoint for even the monsters, because having kind of like these emo monsters, it's interesting. But it's not even consistent with that. So even the monsters are confused, and that's why they seem to be comical more than anything else. Because to a human being, what's funny, it's usually what's absurd. Incoherency, if played right, is comedic. But is that the intention of the author, to make monsters ridiculous and funny? I don't know. It could be, and maybe that's the whole reason I don't get the work. I don't see the line between the serious presentation and the comedic angle. And even destiny itself seems to be out of place in the world of The Witcher. I haven't seen the series, I haven't watched the movie, so I'm not sure if they carry through this issue. So let me know in the comments if the series are better, the movie is better, or any media outside of the book is an improvement. It could be that whoever directs these things will notice the problem and will fix it. I mean, that happens in a lot of works, although it's usually for the worse. Like in the works of Philip K. Dick, if you look at the films, they could be good films, but they're really distorting and changing Philip K. Dick's work. They seem to think they're improving on them to make them more coherent and easier to present in a film, but they're really ruining the book. In this case, it could happen the other direction. It could be that the director would improve on the work. Not very common, but I'll be interested in checking that out if you tell me in the comments it's worth it. Now, I know that this review will bring some people down on the series, and if you're a fan of it, then you'll get angry about it, but just please understand my intention here. So, I love books. People that read books, doesn't matter if they're books that I like or I don't like, are to me in the same club. We are in the same tribe. We're bibliophiles. So the issue of whether or not you like a book that I like or I like a book that you like, it's irrelevant because the love of books is above in the category. I read a lot of stuff that I end up not liking. I even sometimes read books that I know I won't like and I read them anyway. And once I start, I have to finish the book. So that's why I go into these challenges, right? I entered the Witcher challenge even though I read the first collection and I realized I'm not going to like this at all. It's not my thing. But since I started the challenge, I have to finish it. So I'm going to have to go through the entire series. And what I'll probably do is I'll review it as a collective. So the next book is the first one in the 5-book series. And I'm not going to do every book in the series if they suck, because it's going to be just a terrible reviewing experience. So I'll probably just do all 5 novels. If I like them, I'll do one. If I don't like them, I'll just do a single reject review with all 5 in the series and we're done. But I will go through the entire series anyway. And I'll give you my honest take, and you can disagree, agree, no problem. There are going to be things that I love that I think are great, and you're probably going to think they suck. So it's fine. It's a part of the entire human dynamic. And if you want to suggest a series that you think I should go through, I don't mind trying those out too. Even if it's a series that I would never want to go through at all, because I suppose I'm going to hate. But then again, that makes it kind of fun. So I don't mind going through those experiences at all. Even books that I don't like, I learn a lot from them. Like I mentioned in my previous review, there's a sociological benefit in reading works that are very popular. Why do you like this series? Well, that would be a good way of self-analyzing. What is it about this series that you find so fascinating? Is it the cynicism? Is it the tongue-in-cheek? Is it the absurdity? Is it the dynamics of the characters? Do you relate to these characters? I mean, that tells you a lot about yourself. And there are books that I love that I have in my library in a section where I put my favorite works. And if you go in there and you see some of those books, you say, I don't get it. Why does this guy have that book in there? And it's going to be something personal, something particular about the work that touched me. And that's a very subjective thing. I often speak in this channel about objective reality or postmodernism, which is relativistic. But even though I criticize that, it doesn't mean that there aren't things that are subjective, that there aren't things that are relative. Of course, it depends where these ideas are being applied to. Are they being applied to physics or biology, or are they being applied to philosophy or dreams or concepts? So it depends where you're applying these ideas. Certain approaches are appropriate in certain circumstances. If someone loves books and they have a section of their favorites, and their favorites are stuff that I dislike, that doesn't change anything to me. I will respect the person because they have a passion, they love something, and they stick to it. And they will always have a good reason for it, internally speaking. So keep that in mind as I go through challenges, because I know I have subscribers that are into Christian books, and I have subscribers that are into books about Satanism, for example. These are opposites. And I love reading about those two topics, for example. So it may be that one of my subscribers is going to not like the fact that I'm reviewing another book, but I like them all for different reasons. And I'll just give you my honest take, and hopefully you appreciate that. And I appreciate all my subscribers, and their likes and dislikes matter, but I cannot take into account only that, because if not, I just wouldn't be able to create the content that I like. The whole point of this channel is to put out there what I like and my true opinions. And if I start microanalyzing, well, Christian's not going to like this review, or occultists are not going to like this review, or the Buddhists are not going to like this review, then I won't be able to do anything. So I have to just go past it, and hopefully people appreciate the point and how I'm doing things here. I'll cut the review short. Again, I don't like the characters. I don't like the world building because I think it's incomplete. And at the same time, it's so similar to almost all fantasy novels that I don't see anything very creative or interesting. So it's difficult to get into the work, but I'll finish it and I'll do the final review if I start noticing that the series is going to be the same, which I'm pretty sure it will be. And we'll go on to other series as the channel progresses. So hopefully you enjoyed this review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Doing these things helps the channel grow. It helps it become more of a suggested item in YouTube, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.